Well, okay.
There we go. Thank you, Alexa.
Continue.
Yeah, so please, when you have a chance, take a look at that. And if you could go ahead and send it. Now, I'm also going to spotlight. Let me see. Spotlight for everybody. Spotlight.
I'm just going to mute myself, but
Okay,
I'm
very
here.
good. So
Okay.
you were now spotlit, I believe, right? There's just you. So if I do talk, now the whole point, I'm sure you've done a lot of interviews. In my mind, this isn't really one of them. It's more of an oral narrative by people who've lived in Piermont.
So it's like a stream of consciousness. We're just telling you about our life here.
Exactly, and different people have different philosophies, but I found that if you allow some silence and if people are just expressing a direction that is consistent with their experience, it's just more authentic. I mean, I could ask questions, but I might become interested in something that's not really, a part of the Piermont story. So I'll be here. Vic, you'll be here. We're going to mute ourselves, so there won't be that same exchange in person where a person, there'll be some verbal indication that we're paying attention, and we will be, but there won't be any like or yes or any of that.
Gotcha.
But it's just wonderful to have you here. And then at the end, I'm sure if there is something that we wanted to ask a follow-up on, we will, and we have in the past. But basically the tape and the transcript should be all Tom and all Bonnie.
Okay. Let me see. Great. Let me think about it. I had a question which has escaped me, but we sound good. That's good. So I guess we're going to start with the who we are and how we got here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I do have one question that I ask in the beginning, and I ask you, please introduce yourself and let us know where your Piermont memories begin.
Sure. Hello, I'm Tom Chapin.
And I'm Bonnie Chapin.
And our Piermont, my Piermont memories begin with me coming home to our loft in Brooklyn at midnight after a gig. And Bonnie, who had two little girls who were 6 and 4, and two college age kids, just senior in high school, Jessica and Jonathan. And it was midnight, and she was awake, sitting at the table. And we've been looking for a house out of Brooklyn at this point for several months.
Yeah, we weren't really looking in the suburbs. We were looking upstate. We were thinking we'd hold on to our loft and buy a place up in the country, but we'd been looking for a few years and couldn't really find anything.
And so I come home and I walk in, and she looks at me, and I said, something's going on. She says, I think I found it. And she's all excited. Her sister-in-law, Grace Broker, was married to her brother,
Wally Broker, who was at Lamont. He's he passed away, but he's a very, very well-known scientist, and was at Lamont his whole career. Yeah. And Grace had a friend named Mary Watts, who some people will remember, and she called me and she said, my friend Mary is getting into real estate and needs practice. So do you want to come up and have lunch and go see a few houses? And I said, sure, that sounds nice. I had never heard of Piermont, didn't know anything about it. And Grace said she thought it might be a town that we would like.
And then, she told me about this house. And so I said, well, let's go see it. So the next day we drove up, and she brought us in on 9W, then through Tolman, the pretty way, into town, and then through the town, and then up the hill. And we parked in front, and we went in, and it was owned by Don and Gloria.
Yeah, Gloria Blau.
They'd been here. They bought this house in 1959. It was the haunted house on the hill. It was built in 1840 by Eleazar Lord, the great railroad magnate. And it was his church that he built up here as well. It was a Dutch Reformed church, and this is the manse, the minister's house, where all the kind of the daily business happened, including funerals and all kinds of social stuff here. We don't know where the church was because the church is gone, but it was built in 1840, and it was in 1855, the church burned down, and Eleazar Lord at that point, who has a castle up at the top of the hill, still up there, but he had died, and so I think the parishioner said, "We don't want to walk up the hill to go to church anymore," you know. So we're halfway up the hill, so they built the church down on the creek, and the one that's down there now, the Reformed Church, is the third church because the other one burned down as well. So anyway, this was in private hands, a family named Quackenbush, and they were here from 1855 until 1950 or so. Two sisters, evidently, according to Don Blauhut. And actually, we have a copy of House and Gardens, which did an article on this house, because Don Blauhut bought this house for $8,000, including the property next door and the property there. It was the haunted house. There's an amazing picture of this kind of decrepit old lady here. And he just renovated it in 1959, 1960. And then we came by in 1985, and his kids had grown up here, and they were ready to downsize, and they built a place on the creek, which they lived for another 4 or 5 years. Then they moved on. But anyway, we walked in, and we said, "Wow, this is an amazing place." We walked through the house out to the backyard. There's a wonderful deck in the backyard, and this kind of protected backyard that faces the cowboy fields and empty 37 acres of stuff down here. And we just went, oh. And
well, we also got sold on the town because the day that I came, Piermont had a little restaurant called, I think, Bittersweet at that point, that went out of business before we actually moved here. But they took me to that little restaurant, which was lovely. And then, I said, well, Tom doesn't really want to move to the suburbs. But then they told me about the Turning Point, and we saw the pretty shops that were here. And, they kind of sold me on the town, and then obviously sold Tom on the town too.
And so we changed our plan. Actually, what we looked at it, and on the way home, I was going, "Wow, it's expensive. I don't know if we can do this." And Bonnie burst into tears and said, "We're never going to leave Brooklyn." I did. Yeah. And we just started talking about it and said, we can't. I don't want to be an absentee landlord. Let's go for it. So we got it. We basically traded the loft in Brooklyn for this. That loft is on right at the Brooklyn Bridge. It's the 8 Fulton Street on the river, fourth floor. And a year and a half ago, it sold for $5.2 million. But there's many stories about places that you go, but we have no regrets. We've been here since 1985. Abigail and Lily were 6 and 4. Jonathan was in college, and Jessica was about to go to college.
Just leaving for college.
So we had Jessica leaving high school, and all our friends. So that allowed us to move, and Abigail about to go into first grade. And the Brooklyn Heights school was just lousy, and the schools in near us were really expensive. Anyway, this was magical, and the thought that this was so close to New York City. Now I'm a musician, so I was a little worried about leaving New York, and that we talked about it. We said, let's just do it, And so we sold the house in New York in the same morning, came up with the check and gave it to the Blauhuts, and we moved in. Of course, the hottest day of the year in July, and the second day we were here, Jonathan, who was home, it was during the summer, so he was home. There's a knock on the door, and he comes down, he opens the door, and there's a little 5-year-old girl dressed in pinafores. She said, "I came to make friends." And it was Dana Betterton, who lived right across the street, and still our daughter's best friend. There was a 6 and a 4-year-old girl. Her mother had said, "I want to meet them. We'll just go over and knock on the door." Then Jonathan says to me in the evening, he says, "Where do we move to?" It's like what's the
Brigadoon.
Brigadoon. We're in Brigadoon. I can't believe it. This little girl knocks on the door, and he's a little different from Brooklyn,
Well, you have to understand, we lived in a 4-floor industrial walk-up with two little babies and two teenagers, and we didn't have grass or a park or
a backyard
even a tree.
or a tree. And it was before the big park happened and all of the renovation of Dumbo, all down in, which is, and it's now like 42nd Street down there. So we're happy to be here. So then we moved in. I'm very happy. And then in October, Bonnie was out at the doctor's or something, and Willie was at school. Lily was at school at the community playground group right here, and
Abigail was home. Yeah.
And I'm sitting here at the thing, and I hear bang, 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 bang. Whoa, that sounded like gunshots. I got up and went out the front door, and across the street is Fred Sheffold. The Sheffolds, Fred and Joni, and their kids. And Fred was a captain in the fire department. And I looked at him and he said, "Did you hear gunshots?" I said, "Yeah, I think it was over there." We went next door, and there was a body lying there, and this young woman had been killed right next door, and that became a huge, thing. It was really scary, And so I would walk over, and Fred, who's used to these kind of things, and as I'm not, he came up and he said, "Wow!" And then the old man out there, Rudy, came out and said, "He's got a gun! He's got a gun! He killed her! He went out in the back." And Fred, we walked over to the body, and Fred reached out and said, "Oh, this is bad. Get a blanket." And another cop car pulled up, boom, right at that point. And I suddenly thought, Abigail's alone in the house next door. I don't know what's going on here. I'm not any help here. So I ran back, came in here, went upstairs. Abigail's 6 years. She's sitting there. She was supposed to be sick that day, but you know how a child that's sick at 7 in the morning, suddenly at 11 in the morning is not. And she's playing. "Hi, Dad." I said, "Stay here." Said, "What's the matter?" "Just stay here." So I ran down the stairs, went out opened the front door, and there was a young cop in the middle of the street with a shotgun. And I opened the door, and he goes, and I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" He says, "Get back inside! Get back inside!" So this whole thing was happening, and they put a police barrier right behind our house, and by about 2 hours, there were 3 vans with antennas, because this is a big deal. It was a New York transit cop who had shot his wife, his estranged wife, and so we figured he went across into the cowboy fields and up to 9W and hitched a ride and was just gone. And nobody could find him. They brought dogs and all this stuff. And at supper time, I got a knock on the door, ding, ding, ding. And I opened the door, and it's John Johnson from ABC News or one of the news things, and very well-known guy and newsman in New York. And he goes, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I said, "Okay." I step out. Lights are on, and I'm suddenly interviewing me, because I'm a semi-celebrity, And anyway, to make a long story short, and 2 days later, they found him walking
on Halloween. I think
on Halloween, finding him walking in Sparkill, and they nabbed him. The same cop who almost I thought might have been shot by just found him, and he was put away and stuff. But the next, there were a couple of funny things happening, because my brother Jeb is in Brooklyn, and he calls me up because the next morning he hears about this, and the next morning, and the Daily News has a big spread about cop kills cop, and then in the middle they have a picture of the guy and me next door. These 2 pictures, right? So my mother's working at a publishing company up in Manhattan. She says, this guy who's very close to me didn't know what to say to me all day long. Hi, because he was standing over somebody's shoulder in the subway, seeing these 2 pictures, murder, and his compatriot's son he thinks. Anyway, it was one of those sort of strange, not things that happened. It was, and my brother Jeb calls me and said, "Tom, it says here that you moved up to the country so you wouldn't have any murders, because you moved to Brooklyn so it would be safer. How many murders did you have on your street in Brooklyn?" But anyway, that was an awakening. But one of the things we should talk about is the street we live on. It's Piermont Place, and it's halfway up between 9W and the town, and it's a cul-de-sac, and everybody knows everybody. And Fred Shuffle became a great friend across the way. You know, he'd been living. He was a fireman who worked in New York, and a captain, a lovely guy, and we got very close to him. And it was my first owning a house, especially in the, so I looked over there and like his lawn. He never had to mow his lawn, so I came up and said, Fred, because I bought a lawnmower and all the stuff, and I had a big lawn in the back. And I went, Fred, what's about your lawn? He says, you're not fertilizing, are you? So he started laughing at me because I was mowing every 4 days. I had this incredible lawn going, but he got we'll tell about it a little while later. But he was killed in 9/11, and there's a memorial for him down on the pier. But let's talk about that. Was 1985, and Bonnie had a store in Brooklyn.
I had a store with a partner, and it was called By Hand, and we sold fabrics and yarn and various beads and just craft supplies, but mostly fabrics and yarns. And it was a lovely little store. And when we moved up here, I thought maybe I would open just a branch of By Hand, and because I thought it would do well up here, but my partner didn't want to have another store up here. She lived in Brooklyn. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll do something on my own. And I kind of looked around at what was up here, and there were no clothing stores. And we had started selling some of our samples that we made and selling some clothing in our store. So I don't know. I mentioned it to a few people, and everybody seemed very excited. And I just went for it and found a nice little space in Piermont. I was encouraged by Gail Montgomery, who had a store called Hudson Valley Bazaar that was in the same building, and there was an empty space, and Tom said he wasn't busy, so he said he could fix it up for me.
In January and February,
yeah.
It was a good sort of downtime.
Yeah, so that's what happened. And I didn't really have that much experience in doing clothing, but as it turned out, it was very successful. And I was always happy that I did it. But
it was. I remember the beginning of it. She would go down. She got to know some of the storekeepers, including Gail Montgomery. Had this beautiful place called Hudson Valley Bazaar, and right next to her was a guy who fixed furniture, stripped furniture. So she was very happy when he decided to move, and she said, I want you to come in here. And so she did. Bonnie opened up right there. And
so it made a difference in Piermont. I think it was a lovely store. Lots of interesting people worked for me over the years. And there were lots of other very nice shops in Piermont at that time. There was a bookstore when we moved here, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was really nice. But she got tired of doing it. But then there was Table Set, which had beautiful tableware and a lot of handmade pottery and that sort of thing. And I'm trying to remember.
Buttercup and Friends.
Buttercup and Friends, which was the most unique little children's store, which actually just went out of business recently. And the Turning Point was such a special place. Besides the music, they were known for their food, and especially something called their everything sandwich. And I remember when Jonathan was ready to go back to college, every time he'd come home for Thanksgiving or whatever, he always stopped at the Turning Point to get an everything sandwich to take back with him on the plane. They were very delicious. Oh, and then there was the community market, which was, I'm sure somebody else has talked about this, but such a special place. And it was a market that had everything you could possibly want, and wonderful quality of meats and
Alan was a butcher, so he really knew the meats.
Lots of gourmet foods, and it was really a fantastic place.
And people would come from like Palisades and stuff. It was one of the unique things about this town, of course, is that it's very, there are a lot of artists who moved from New York City. And Bonnie was in there one day, she came up and said, I just was standing there and I looked at this guy next to me, and it was Mikhail Baryshnikov,
Standing at the meat
at the meat counter.
I looked down at these white shoes. I said, "Those are unusual." And then my eyes went up, and that was Baryshnikov standing there. But yeah, so many interesting people in town, and
in this whole area, really.
yeah, that would come to Piermont.
So after and Gail Montgomery moved a couple of times from there, and one of the people who moved in next to Bonnie was Mickey Murray, Bill Murray's first wife, and she had a store called
Whispering Pines, which people loved.
Yeah,
I think people came from all over to that store. It was like a North Woods, flannel shirts and things from Maine, and it was just
I think they had a canoe in there, and it was
it was just a fantastic store. And so she was a great neighbor for several years, and then she finally decided not to do it anymore. I think she still might even have a presence online, but that was another very special place that came to Piermont.
And we should talk about the Turning Point a little bit. I'm a musician and a folk singer, and played there forever. But it was really a lovely thing to have in your town. John McAvoy's kept that going for so many years, and it was always a delight to play there. It's a small place, but so many of my friends played there. Richie Havens, Bob Gibson, Guy Davis, Christine Lavin, I'm thinking of who else, Maria Moldar, Jonathan Edwards, and we got to do it became every Christmas we do it. Tom Chapin and Friends, and my buddies Michael Mark and John Cobert, who both live nearby. One in Chappaqua, John Cobert, and Michael Mark lives in Spring Valley, and that became a regular event for us until this last year in COVID. We didn't do it. But we're planning to do it this year. We'll see as the world changes, and that's an amazing thing for me. I travel all over the country and all over the world really to play, and here in my hometown, there's this wonderful little magical place that gets astonishing artists to play, and it's kept going forever, and it's. So big thanks to John McAvoy and what else about the music? Well, my career, the nice thing about this place is, for me, it gave me a lot of space, and it's a wonderful house to write in and do stuff. But also, it's close to the airports. When we were in Brooklyn, LaGuardia was very easy to get to, but from here, that's not so easy, and JFK is a long way. But Newark was very easy. It was always 40 minutes no matter what. And so I could fly out and, of course, drive from here. And the other thing about Piermont is to get in and out of New York City is magical. If you go in any other place that's not on the Palisades, if you're going out at Route 80 or any of those places, you're stuck with all the Jersey traffic. And here we have this. It's like our own driveway. Once you get on the Palisades, there's times where it's when it gets heavy, but it's nothing like being the other areas. So that's always easy if you're not going in at rush hour. There was some years when I was a host of a TV show, National Geographic, and I had to be in the city, for 4 or 5, 2 weeks in a row. And what I do is just go in early and park, and it was it's half an hour to Midtown. It's easier to get there than it was from Brooklyn. So it's amazing in terms of the magic of this spot, so close and yet so unique. It's not even upstate. It's just its own little magical place, and we're still in love with it. Let's talk about 9/11 a little bit. There are 2 firefighters who died that live in this town, Dennis McHugh, and they've named the library after him, which is great. I didn't know Dennis particularly, but we knew Fred Sheffield, and he was a lovely, lovely guy. And that day was still sort of burned in our heads. I was in New York City doing I had an interview with NPR to publicize a concert I was doing in North Carolina next week. and they worked out that I would do something that would play in North Carolina, but I had to record it in New York. So it was the morning of that. I was supposed to go and do it at 1 Center Street, right downtown. But at the last minute, they called me and said that studio's booked. There's another one up on 90th Street in Central Park West. So I said, okay. So I went there, and I'm on there talking to somebody from North Carolina about this show I'm going to do next week. And all of a sudden, they broke in and said, a little 2-engine plane has just hit one of the towers, and more about that on the hour, you know. And then I finished mine, and I walked in the other room, and all of a sudden the other plane hit, and that became the whole drama, you know, watching this. And I think it's before cell phones, right? I don't remember having cell phones.
I think it is before cell phones.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I called home and various things, and I had driven in, and it took me 4 hours to get out because all the bridges and tunnels were closed, and the whole thing went crazy. But I finally came home, and I pulled up, and there was Joni across the street, and I said, "Wow, what's happening?" I said, "Have you heard from Fred?" She said, "No, he's in town, but he'll call." You know, and then that started. I had a couple of days of just.
Yeah. Have you heard from him? And no, but he never calls us. You know, she kept up
Hope, yeah.
for quite a few days.
Yeah. So.
But,
and finally, the fire chief of New York came up to visit them, and he walked in their house and said, "Turn that off, the TV." He says, "You'll know before anybody. It's just going to drive you crazy because every time they found something, they found something, found something." So they had a wonderful memorial for him at the St. John Catholic Church, and I sang. And emotional. There was those firefighters. So it hit us all. You know, it's hard to believe. So, but let's talk about our daughters and going to school here. When we got here, there was a community playgroup had a nice little school right.
That was actually a wonderful thing. The community playgroup. Lily was in kindergarten, I think, and Abigail was in first grade. So we signed up Abigail for Schaefer School, and Lily got to. I think she was in kindergarten. That's right, and she got to go to the community playgroup after school, and they had a sliding scale for people so that people could pay as they could, which was very nice. And she could stay after school if I had to be in the city on a buying trip or something, or I could pick her up, you know, at noon. But it was just such a lovely place. I was very disappointed when they stopped doing that.
Yeah.
But we started out with public school, and we were definitely confident that that's what we were going to do. Send our kids to public school here. But Abigail was very unhappy with her first grade class. So we ended up putting her in private school. And Lily did stay with the public school for a couple of years. But we joined a few other families from Piermont in sending our kids eventually to Blue Rock School, which was just starting out at the time. And it's still going and doing very well. As a matter of fact, our grandchildren are going to go there, and that is in West Nyack, I believe.
Yeah, in those days it was in Palisades, right?
Yeah,
It was in
They had just started out.
Yeah,
and then our daughters ended up at Green Meadow, and you know, as I said before, there were a couple of other families in Piermont who sent their kids to the same schools, and they were all still very close and keep in touch with each other and are very close friends up until this point when they're, you know, almost 40, and it's been many years. You know.
And they went from here to college, and then Abigail and Lily started their own band and went to with their sister Jessica out in California. So they went out in California for 6 years, and then moved back here. Both got married, and now they're both back in Rockland, and they sort of feel like they've come home. Lily's in Nyack, and Abigail's up in Stony Point. And I don't know what else to tell you about about our journey, but this is the girls have taken over Bonnie's store
And moved to Nyack.
and moved it to Nyack,
Yeah.
which has more foot traffic right now these days. The store is called Abigail Rose and Lily too, and Abigail Rose and Lily run it now. So,
Yeah.
And it's doing very well, thank goodness. And we've felt like this has been a magical place to be, and we're very pleased and proud to be Rockland County. You know, we moved. I grew up, as I said, in New York City. Bonnie grew up in Chicago, and but this is our home.
Wonderful. It's wonderful.
So amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I mean, I think it's perfect. The only thing I might suggest, since this is kind of like a time capsule and it's something for others to share, but also for you to have and to share with your children and your family, I'll send you the link to the video, and if you want to look at it.
I want to sing you a song I wrote about the turning point, and it's about the town too. Can I do that?
Wonderful. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm going to move.
Okay.
Just because.
Sure. I did my last album was called At the Turning Point, and we recorded it live at the Turning Point. A bunch of songs that I felt like recording, and my friend Sai Khan came and visited, and I said, you know, it's such a great idea for a song, The Turning Point. And so we let me tune this. We got together and wrote this song for Johnny McAvoy and for the town. We have traveled hard, traveled long, many a night and day. Stops, starts, turning points along the way. But now and then we come to rest among old friends and new, and it fills my heart with gratitude to share this night with you. At the turning point, we reunite with family and friends. One more December slips away, the long year ends. There's a touch of snow on the river road, the old becomes the new, returning to the turning point with you. Well, the Hudson Valley's been my home for 30 years and more. The welcome that I found is like an open door. Streets and sidewalks will comfort me, whether I'm up or down. I will never be a stranger in this old river town. At the turning point, we reunite with family and friends. One more December slips away, the long year ends. There's a touch of snow on the river road, the old becomes the new, returning to the turning point with you. May the bridges that we build never crumble, never burn. May our journeys never come to May our voices fill this room, lift our hearts with cheer. May we return to the turning point, this time again next year. At the turning point, we reunite the family and friends. One more December slips away, the long year ends. There's a touch of snow on the river road, the old becomes the new. Returning to the turning point, returning to the turning point, returning to the turning point with you.
That was amazing.
Wow.
I
That
feel
seems to
so
fit.
honored to hear that live.
Seems to fit, right?
Yes.
Incredible.
What were you? I know. What were you saying? Anything else you need?
No, I mean, I'll send you, that was wonderful. That I can't wait. I want to find a way to share that with folks sooner than later. Because we have a little taste of John McAvoy's oral history that we're going to share online soon.
I wonder if David could play that in the background of
Absolutely.
his stories.
We
Like
can
just
do it in the
faintly.
background, and then we can have a little bit of this because he's reopening too. He's
I know. I know.
That would be
Reopened.
perfect.
That's wonderful. So you can decide. I'll send you the link, and you can look at it if you care to, and if you decide that there's a story you want to add, we'll give you a second, third, or fourth bite at the apple, whatever. But and then I know you're moving, right?
We're moving. We just got a house in Sparkle.
Oh, so you're not. Oh, yeah, good, great. All right. So then we
My
hopefully
real
will.
estate agent has been sending, call me immediately, call me immediately. So we do that.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much,
Well,
guys.
we hope you'll join us in September. There's going to be a program for the 125th anniversary of the library. So we hope you can be a part of it in some way.
I have a great library song as well.
Wow.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I'm going down to the library, picking out a book, check it in, check it out. Going to say hi to the dictionary, picking out a book, check it in, check it out. Cool.
You
Thanks.
might have to perform that day.
I will.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I'm sorry I'm rushing here, but I want to
That's
get.
No problem.
okay.
You got to call the real estate agent.
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Thanks for
Bye,
sharing.
guys.
Bye now.
Take care.
So hang in there, Vicky.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop.